At first glance, there's nothing here that reveals the awesome history of this piece of earth. But when you look a little closer, maybe there is after all. That's right, on this episode of Destination Anywhere, we're going to examine the story of the now extinct Trenton Speedway, formerly located in Hamilton, New Jersey. But not only was this a location of one of the most unique tracks in racing history, but it was also the site of the New Jersey State Fairgrounds throughout the 20th century. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the Mickey Shuffle and hit that notification bell if you're into history, mysteries, and other fun stuff. With that out of the way, let's get it in gear. One could say the story of Trenton Speedway starts all the way back in 1745. It was in that year that King George II of Great Britain issued a royal charter, paving the way for fairs in the Trenton area, mainly for the purpose of buying and selling animals. While the Trenton area would see more of these events throughout the years, it wasn't until 1888 that some ambitious farmers and businessmen decided to get serious about their fair idea. At that point, they purchased over 100 acres of land in the northwest part of Hamilton. Today, that piece of land plays home to Hamilton's grounds for sculpture, as well as a UPS facility and a Walmart supercenter. Here's how the layout would compare to a picture from 1922. As the turn of the century came, the sport of horse racing was gaining popularity, so a racetrack and grandstands were central to the area. Soon, names would come from all over to show off at the fairgrounds, including aviation pioneers the Wright brothers who came to town in 1909. While the fair events would continue to draw crowds throughout the first half of the 20th century, one of the most important moments was when show business entrepreneur George A. Hamid took over the fairgrounds in the late 1930s. Notable for eventually owning Atlantic City's Steel Pier, Hamid was born in Lebanon and came to America in 1907 as a young acrobat. By the 1930s, Hamid had a well-known reputation for reviving struggling amusements, which led New Jersey Governor Harry Moore to personally ask Hamid to take over the faltering Trenton Fairgrounds. In a unique twist, it was upon inspection of the fairgrounds that Hamid realized it was the same place that he had spent his first night in America 30 years prior. Besides hosting the fair each year, Hamid helped quench the public's growing thirst for competitive auto racing. Up until the 1940s, the fairgrounds had only featured a half-mile dirt track, but soon the track was increased to a full mile after American racing resumed post-World War II. Within a few years, some of the best open-wheel racers around were coming to Trenton to compete. It wasn't until the Speedway was paved in 1957 that the United States Auto Club, or USAC, would become a permanent fixture at Trenton. But after that, they would continue to return for the next 23 years. Of all the track changes over the years, it was the 1969 renovation that was the biggest and best. Boasting an increased seating capacity of roughly 30,000 and a repaved surface, the track was holding true to its nickname of the Indianapolis of the East. Of all the changes, however, it was Speedway officials' desire to increase the length of the track to 1.5 miles that called for a creative solution to deal with existing houses on the backstretch. The answer was a 20-degree dogleg right turn that made Trenton Speedway one of the most unique and beloved tracks on the circuit. Also known as the kidney bean shape, this single right turn was the enemy of car mechanics, but drivers loved the challenge. Twice a year, legends such as AJ Foyt, Mario Andretti, and Bobby Unser, as well as local favorite Wally Dellenbach, would join dozens of other elite drivers converging on the area. While the Indy cars were the big deal at the time, Trenton would also host NASCAR's Winston Cup Series on several occasions, including 3 races won by the King, Richard Petty. And last but not least, the track would host local races as well, including the famed triple headers on State Fair weekends, which would see the best in local action go head-to-head. Early on in this project, I mentioned to my dad that I was doing something on Trenton Speedway. A couple days later, he told me to swing by the house to pick something up. What I received was nothing short of a periodical time machine. These are all the programs that my grandfather saved from going to Trenton for throughout the 60s and 70s. Wow. Look at this one, Northern 300. Looking at all the programs and scanning the insides, the experience finally became real to me. The magazines were like a time portal, and I could really feel the excitement the events brought to the area. Al Unser, Mario Andretti, AJ Foyt, Bobby Unser. Besides the awesome color photos inside, almost all of them featured an opening page listing the track officials, as well as a letter from the race organizer. Some of the best parts were the ads for local businesses, like this one for Cedar Garden Restaurant that said you could meet your favorite drivers after the race. Heck, if you just look at the covers, you could tell that the events were a big deal at the time. So thanks for saving these, Pop. While the Fairgrounds and Speedway continued to have success into the 70s, the decade started with the loss of George Sr. as he passed away in 1971. His son, George Jr., who had already been heavily involved with the operation, would assume official responsibility for the track and Fairgrounds at that point. While the big races would continue along with other notable events, as the decade wore on, the crowds would start to dwindle, and an uncertain future began to emerge. In June of 1980, the Dogleg 200 would become the final race at Trenton Speedway, and in August of that year, 130 of the Fairgrounds' remaining acres would be auctioned off to a winning bidder for just $550,000. After a legal battle, this bid would be thrown out, and the property was officially sold the following year to developer Max Zeitz, with the final fair at the Fairgrounds held in September of 1981. By 1982, the fair had moved to Great Adventure in Jackson, and by 1983, demolition was the name of the game, as seen in these photos taken by John Lengenfelder. Today, there's not much left to let you know the history that took place here. Besides the Walmart that sits on the southern end of the old property, there's the Grounds for Sculpture Art Exhibition Park that continues to draw visitors to the area. Inside the park, you can find a marker that mentions the history of the land. More significant are the renovated buildings that still stand on the grounds. In this aerial shot from 1922 again, you can see these buildings from the opposite angle. My guess is that one of these may have been the barn George Hamid Sr. stayed in during his first night in America, but I can't verify that. Also, it said that the section of the park called Sculpture Court is actually sitting on top of the concrete foundation of the old grandstands. You can somewhat visualize this when you compare the layout from before to now. Finally, there's the grass outline that I was told was actually part of the apron of the old track. It's been over 40 years since a race was run at Trenton, but that doesn't erase the records or the memories made here. Whether you came to check out the fair, take in a world-class racing event, or see your favorite musical group, you probably have a fond memory of the place. And while it physically doesn't exist anymore, it's still alive in the pictures and minds of all those lucky enough to visit. If you have a fond memory of this area, do me a favor and leave your story in the comments. Before I go, I have to give a quick shout out to the people that helped me put this project together. First up, I gotta thank Joe from 3 Wide's Picture Vault, who helped me get the ball rolling here. If you're into New Jersey racing, visit 3 Wide's Picture Vault and I promise you won't regret it. Another great site for old racing history is wallycampbell.com. Thanks again, Jeff. Then a huge thank you to John Lengenfelder, James Hamid Jr., Joe DeMemo, and of course my grandfather, Marty Franz, for the pictures and insights provided. Last but not least, don't forget to subscribe to the Mickey Shuffle on YouTube.